it comes to human beings, we are the only one in this universe who are endowed with intellect. And to intellect with a powerful thing as two kinds of intellect, which is a gross intellect and a subtle intellect. Through the gross intellect, we will contact this world or reason the external objects. And through the subtler intellect, we can contemplate on the reality of the self through which we do an inward retrospection, and self-realization happens through our subtler intellect. So it's only the human beings in this whole universe is endowed with this capability of intellect. And the reason we are going through this Bhagavad Gita is to understand how the instruments of body, mind, and intellect functions, and how strengthening the intellect helps us to perform our activities in a better way in all walks of our life, while maintaining peace of mind and gaining happiness. So this is the only instrument that we have. And so we have to use this instrument. The thing that is happening now is that the human intellect has been fallen down. The reasoning capability has come down because we are using the mind in most of the terms, and we are not reasoning and living the life with judgments and reasoning. For everything, we take many things for granted. We continue whatever has been told by our elders in many walks of our life. So this was the thing. We saw the analogy of chariot and charioteer. Yes. So the main concept or the differentiation we had is Atman is different from the three instruments that we are perceiving this world, the body, mind, and the intellect. Now we are going to the next shloka. देहिनोऽस्मिन् यथा देहे कौमारं यौवनं जरा तथा देहान्तरप्राप्तिः धीरस्तत्र न मुह्यति. So Lord Krishna is continuing his preachings. He's saying, just as the embodied in the sense the thing that is embodied passes through the childhood, youth, and old age in this body, so does it pass into another body. There, the wise one is not grieved. So there he knows, I mean, the thing that is embodied in your, what we call is a body, whichever is embodied, passes through. When he is saying embodied, he is referring to the Atman. So the Atman that is embodied in your body, we have to say it as a body physically, what we see, undergoes different transformations in the current life, which we see, which is when we are born, from each stage of the life till we become old and then leave our body. The transition is there, the transformation is there. In the same way, after we leave the body also, the embodied thing continues the transmigration to another body. The wise one who knows this will not grieve because the embodied is leaving this body and taking another body. Because here Arjuna grief was on the body because they are going to die. So he is grieving for the death of, or for the existence, leaving the existence of the physical body. So when we take the stages of our life, when we say child, we pass through all these stages. So when we are born, we are an infant, then we become a toddler, then child, then we become a teenager, then an adult, then following to the old age. And when we ask, how does each stage happens? It is, in a way, the death of the infancy leads to the toddlership. The death of toddler stage leads to a child stage. So the death of every previous stage leads to the next stage. But at the end, when we say death, we think that death is the end. Here, the knowledge that we are gaining is that death is not just an end of the life, because the Atman is not bound to the body. So even after the death is also like a stage of progression of your Atman to some other body. So it is a transformation, as how the transformation happens from your child to the old age, and then from there we leave our body and take another body. Similarly, the wise man will always know this truth, that the Atman is the truth which is not going to die, and they don't grieve on that. So the body is impermanent. So the body, only the physical body which is gross, only has the manufacturing and the expiry date. Whereas the self here refers to the Atman, is eternal. We should not grieve for the self which is imperishable. And from the point of self, it is unwise to grieve for the dead, because the second story building, Lord Krishna is there, where his eye refers to self. So from his standpoint, it is not needed to grieve over the dead. So when we look back our old photos, suppose we have become old, 60, 65 years of age, we look back into the memories, taking our album from our time we are born to the time we became 65. When we look at each photo, when we say we are not the body, how are we saying we are not the body? When we look at the photo when we are a newborn or when we were young, does our physical body look like the one in the photo? When we are at 65 years of age?
No, not same.
So it will not be the same. So when we say I am my body, we cannot say it, because at every point of time, the body has been changing throughout. At the same time, when we talk about the mind, what is mind? Mind is nothing but the realm of emotions or feelings. The feelings you had when you were 2 years old, do you have the same feelings when you have 65 years old? When I say that the desires, the way you want things, the way you were playing with toys, your likes and dislikes when you were 2 years, are they same when you are 65 years?
No.
So they also change. So anything that is changing cannot be the truth, but we are the truth. So we are also not our mind, because the likes and dislikes, the desires, everything changes with time. When we take the intellect, the reasoning capability, is the reasoning capability the same when you are 2 years versus when you are 65 years? Do you reason the same way?
No.
We don't reason the same way, because the intellectual capability at the age of 2 is different from the intellectual capability at the age of 65, and also various factors come into play. So that is also not constant. It is also changing. So based upon this, we can always conclude, because all these phases are changing and the self which is eternal is not changing. So the self cannot be the body, the self cannot be the mind, and the self cannot also be the intellect. The reason being, self is changeless. Anything that is changing cannot be the self, because it doesn't correlate with the definition of the self. So who is that real you in all the photos? When I say I am that, this is me, this is me, this is me, we are actually referring to that life enlivening principle, or the life within us. In our body, we have trillions and trillions of cells, and every day, lot of cells keep on dying, again rejuvenating. Some of them will be rejuvenating, some of them will die, and some of them will uh, totally go away. There will be a lot of cycles happening inside our body. In spite of knowing these many cells are dying in our body every day, are we bothered with the death of the cells? Do we take this as a bigger issue, that per day these many cells are dying in my body? Will you be worried with the cell cycle going on in your body?
No.
Why? Because it's dying every
The
day.
new ones are
The
coming
cell
up.
is yours.
Replace. Because the cell is dying and new cells are also producing.
The new cells also producing. So you have the right identification with your cells. You know that even though one cell dies, the things that are required for your body will get
Yes.
rejuvenated, it gets formed. And that's why, because of that right identification, of the process of the cells. You are not worried of the cells that are being dead every day. In the same way, when you take the self as your body and the cells as your the physical body, if you apply the same analogy, the self is also not affected by losing the physical body, because it knows that is just to acquire a new body. So it will not be affected. So this analogy, when we apply in a bigger way, the physical human body and the cell applied to a self and the physical human body, it is almost the same. And when we look at spirituality and science, the science, we are into this total modern scientific world where everything is believed only when there is a proof. Only when there is a proof. And our mind has gone to such an extent that for everything that we say, you say, show me, or what is the thing behind it. But when it comes to spirituality, which deals with the subtler concepts, cannot be proved every time, everywhere, because it is mostly an experiential science, and the modern science is an experimental science. So there is always a conflict between a spirituality and science, in the sense spirituality is always annoyed with the modern science because the modern science keeps on asking the proofs before it can believe in anything, and the science generally doesn't accept what the spirituality says immediately, because they feel that it's all nonsense. But later, at later points of time, which was told in years and years and centuries ago, now the science again proves it, that the same point is right. But it takes that much amount of time for them to really understand the depth of the concepts that our ancient rishis or the sages have put together in the scriptures. So what we call as the law of incarnation, or the law of birth and death, or the cycle of birth and death, can be related to the law of conservation of matter, which is told in the modern science. So the law of conservation of matter also says the same thing. Matter cannot be destroyed or it cannot be created, because the atoms present everywhere are the same. So that's what is the universal cosmic theory of birth and death. So we are all part of the cosmos. We are the all part of the macrocosm. So once we liberate, we become one with the universe. So whatever was there during creation and whatever is there now, everything is the same. It's just that the cycle goes on and gone until we get the liberation. It just changes its forms. So Carl Sagan is a famous astrologer. So this was the material that I prepared for kids. So there are a lot of scientific evidences I put for them to make them understand. So he's a American astrologer who backed up spirituality quite a bit. And he tells that absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence, because science always asks, where is the evidence? And he has put forth a strong statement saying that absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence, which is quite strong to be used for the spirituality, because you cannot prove everything like an experiment. So this is the general saying in Sanskrit, et pinde tat brahmande, which means that our body itself is a miniature universe. When we take the functioning of our body, it is similar to how the universe functions. So we are just a microcosm of the macrocosm, and we are the replica of the entire universe. So the whole entire cosmos is within us. We are made of star stuff. We are a way for the universe to know itself. So if you understand the true nature of yourself, it means we have understood the cosmos around us. So this again brings back to the same verse that we have, the Tatvamasi, which means the Tat represents the truth, Tvam represents all forms of the universe, and Asi represents the synthesis, or that thing that binds together. So whenever they say that thou art that, so we are that truth. And the truth is that we are one pure consciousness, which is the one with the universe. And these are the four Mahavakyas, which has been outlined in Vedanta and will be referred every time when we talk about the self or the Atman. So it is the Aham Brahmasmi, Tattvamasi, I am Atma Brahma, and Prajnanam Brahma. These all states the same thing. And the door of liberation, which is the liberation from the birth and death, will happen for persons who truly understands the ego part, like the identification of themselves, the true I. When it is understood and realized, that's when the doors of liberation opens. So here, when we compare, when Atman, or when universe is same within everyone, and everyone has the same spark of pure consciousness, why are we acting in a different ways, and why are each people different? This is because when we compare Atman to a sun, the sunlight comes and shines on us. The pure consciousness that shining is the same. But why are we perceiving things differently, or why are we different? Because the reflecting medium, which is the mind, is different in each and every one of us. And our mind is again subject to the three gunas of nature, the sattva, tamas, and rajas. And because of that, the way we see the world, the way we interact with the world differs. That's why each of us is unique. The core of each one of us is the same, but each one of us are unique because the reflecting medium, which is the mind, is unique based upon our tendencies or vasanas. So why the same uniform light is not reflected from every human being? It's because the reflected light will be clear only if the reflecting medium is equally clear. The mirror, which is the mind, is so clouded with impurities that the reflected light varies with every individual depending upon her anatma, which is the non-soul part. So we employ our body, mind, and intellect to contact the world. Atma merely animates them. It has little to do with their activities. So it is just a witness of the activities. But the mind, body, and intellect cannot function without the Atman. So the Atman serves as an electricity to the electrical gadgets. So these, when if you think body, mind, and intellect as electrical gadgets or the instruments, Atman serves as electricity to them. So it remains as a mere animating principle, witnessing our physical, mental, and intellectual activities. So when we talk about the knowledge in Vedanta, we talk about two types of knowledge. One is Apara Vidya and Para Vidya. Apara Vidya is all the knowledge that we gain from the schools, colleges, or anything knowledge that is related to the external world. And this knowledge, Apara Vidya, is mostly used for making a living. Whereas Para Vidya is called as self-knowledge or Adhyatma Vidya, which is needed to understand the true self, to get an understanding about the truths of who we are. So just by having Aparavidya, we will not be able to have the self-knowledge. That's why Paravidya is more important to understand if you wish to understand the true self. And in the verses 12 and 13, the I of what we call as ego is represented correctly by saying that I doesn't refer to the body, mind, or intellect, and the I refers to the Atman or the enlivening principle which is present in every one of us.
I have a doubt here, Abhita.
Yeah, Uma.
You're talking about Paravidya, right?
Yeah.
Paravidya. So, Paravidya, or how do you, what is the meaning of that word? Because we also say one who's realized or one who's great is called Parabrahmam, right? We say that.
Yeah.
So, is it related to this? Who has acquired
Yeah.
this knowledge?
Yeah. Paravidya is the knowledge of the absolute.
Knowledge of the absolute. Okay.
Yeah. So self is nothing but that absolute, right? So when we say self, Atman, now we are talking about that absolute knowledge. And Aparavidya is about a relative knowledge. For Aparavidya, there should be an object. But for Paravidya, there is no object.
What is the meaning, the literal meaning of the word apara and para?
See, Apara means like which needs an objectification.
Okay.
Yeah, which needs an object to be talked about.
Okay. So, and
Yeah.
para means there's
Para,
nothing, just
nothing.
empty, is it?
It can be considered as empty or it can be considered as full. It's like infinite. You cannot define it actually. It is the absolute.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Abhita.
Yeah. Okay. So I had just put forth a cycle to clearly understand the flow of the thing that I think last week also we talked a bit about vasanas. And vasanas, we have told that vasanas are nothing but our innate tendencies which we get from our previous lives and all. So I'm just going to explain briefly about a cycle. Have you heard about the word samskaras?
Yes, Abhita.
What is the idea you have about samskaras?
The nature of a person, which comes from the family
Okay.
upbringing. I think it's like it comes from the upbringing of the family.
Okay. So here the yeah, Uma.
Is it related to culture, the culture or the discipline or the rules which are passed down?
Yes, that is when we, both of you, whatever you have said is when you connect it to the external world. But this samskara is, we are referring to the internal world, like that is for the self. When we talk about the internal self of samskara, what it means is that we are saying that we will have many births, we have come across many lives. So in each lives, we will be acting, we will be accumulating lot of vasanas because of our actions, good, bad, anything it could be. But it is a samskara in Sanskrit literally means mental impressions. So the mental impressions comes from all our past activities. But at the current, we don't remember what actions we did. But we have certain kind of impressions. Impressions are like, we can say like negatives. They are not still taken into film. So these are like the negatives in our camera. We really don't understand, even when we think of it, why am I having this kind of quality? You might not get an answer for that. But the life that progresses carries a certain amount of memory with it to the next lives. So the samskaras are passed from life to life like that. And it is a bundle of layers and layers of memory that we have, which is the cause for our vasanas. So when we are talking about vasanas or the tendencies or the inclinations, we say that we are here to act because we have vasanas. And exhaustion of all our vasanas will take us to a mukti or liberation of birth and death. We have to reach to a state where we have no desires. That's called a desireless state. So when we say vasanas, from where are these vasanas are easily understandable, because when we say tendencies or inclinations, certain person has an inclination towards, a person has an inclination to music, a person has an inclination towards sports, or a person has inclination towards any walk of life or particular activity. We can see it because we see the tendencies in a person which are driving him, or vasanas are the cause for our desires in the current life. But what are the cause of vasanas is samskaras, and how samskaras come? It is the memory that comes through the transmigration of the previous lives. So samskaras create vasanas, and the vasanas are our subconscious urges, desires, feeling, and this vasanas gives rise to Trishna. Trishna is desire. So this gives rise to directly our desires. Because of vasanas, we feel doing a certain thing. And because of desire, what do? We get attached. The main problem is that we all get attached to our desires. Okay, I want this, I want that, I want to do this, I want this to be like that, I want this to be like that. So we develop sangha, which is the attachment towards our desires. Now, because desires are there and we have attached to the desires, there is a compulsion to fulfill the desires. So how do we fulfill the desires? By putting an effort. That is karma, that is action. So we put an effort to fulfill the desires that arouse because of vasana, and we do an effort. And when we do our actions, what happens? Because we are attached, we experience raga dveshas, which are the likes and dislikes. We always propel between the dualities of the world. That's the reason we feel elated or depressed for activities. Because of the Sangha, we have to have Raga Dvesha. If there is no Sangha, no Raga Dvesha. Because we are attached to the desires, we will come into the spectrum of likes and dislikes or Raga Dvesha. And because we always are between these two polarities or the dualities of this world, we will again take rebirths. After this physical body is gone, there will be some accumulated karmas or some accumulated things which takes us, which adds again to the samskaras, and this cycle continues. And when the cycle of rebirth will be broken is when we change the cycle here from forming the desires. If you see, right, we have no control on the samskaras we had by the time we are born. We have no control over the vasanas or the tendencies we have. But we have choice, we have the power to choose our desires. Yeah, desires come like that. That is mind. It produces a lot of desires, but we have control to control to have the desire, to encourage the desire, or to suppress the desire, to get attached to the desire. So this desire, attachment, effort, and this Raga Dvesham is again, if you are attached, you come to the Raga Dvesha. If you are not attached, you won't come. So this desire, attachment, and effort is totally the choice we have in the present life. So Vasana is a cause as well as an effect. In the Vasana becomes a cause when you create an action and that action produces some kind of tendencies. Then it becomes into samskara. Whereas in the previous life, when we think about, Vasana was an effect of the from the samskara. So the current actions gives rise to future vasanas, and we are doing the current actions because of past vasanas. Is it clear or confusing? Vasanas is both a cause and an effect.
Not very clear, Abhita. Still confusing. I have one doubt in the samskaras itself. You're saying that samskara, that mental impression, is because of our past births. But
Past
then
action, past
past
actions.
past actions. So when you're
Yeah.
born as a baby itself, you're saying that from the small thing itself, we are born with that past impressions, the
Yeah.
impressions basically. Then where
Yeah.
does the DNA comes? Like the vasanas also, we'll say, no, he is like his father, he's like the baby is like his mother. So there are
You are talking about the physical. See, this doesn't correlate to the modern science. If you correlate it with the DNAs or things, this I cannot give you a one-to-one matching to that. But when we say vasanas here, these are all the subtle things that we are talking about. When we say samskaras, it means the inclination. Suppose in this life, I was a robber. So my thought process, my thought things and all was about robbery, going, seeing anything, stealing. Okay. So I left this body, this life, all my mental impressions, your impressions comes because of your thoughts. So the way I was thinking, the way I was acting in my life, next life, if I am born at any place, that in the subconscious mind, this impression will be there. So when I see something, I will get that vasana because of the negative impression that I had, or that negative of that impression I had in my past life. I will not remember why I had, but for most of us in the subconscious mind, if you see, there will be certain amount of impressions that is carried over from the past lives. We cannot scientifically say that why you are behaving in certain way, but the yogic science says that this is the memory that we carry from life to life. This memory carries over from life to life.
So this means 100% the person was there before. That is, you will be reborn. So there is nothing called nirvana or no rebirth or anything. So everybody will be reborn. Does it mean that?
No, that's why we say, no, the rebirth can be stopped when you stop the vasanas. The way to stop the rebirth is only your present life.
Okay.
So when you have vasana, that's what I said. See, samskaras, the bundle of mental impressions that you had from the past cannot be changed. That is the one that is producing the vasanas. So vasanas can also not be changed, but vasanas can be exhausted. So you get a desire. Now I am here. I don't know, but I feel like stealing, but still I can control the desire and not act towards it. Okay,
But
because of vasana.
isn't
Stage you are
nurture
killing that vasana. At that state, that vasana is been destroyed. Not the
Yes, see.
rebirth and birth, not that concept.
No, here, see, when you don't have vasanas, rebirth is nothing but going to a vasana-less state. When you
Okay.
have no desires at all with a complete understanding of the self, so that is, I'll show in the next slide. So that is the end of the process of birth and rebirth according to Sankhya theory.
Okay.
Yeah, Uma, what was your question?
No, so see, for if a person, then you're saying that at a person, they also say, right, that generally that if a person's soul leaves the body, only when he is desireless. If a person has some desire, then the soul clings to the body. The soul leaves the body only when that desire is fulfilled. But you're saying that so if a desire is fulfilled and the soul leaves the body, then there is no question of rebirth, right? It's a fulfilled life there. Then there is no vasana left. Then only then the soul leaves. Then is that theory wrong? That a soul
No.
leaves?
See, the soul leaves the body without any vasanas. So when you exhaust your vasanas, the self-realization is also important. Self-realization, I'll take you to the next slide. See
Okay.
if it makes sense. And then, so here what
Yeah.
I'm trying to say is, vasanas, we have no effect. We don't have any control. So because of vasanas, we get desires. We have choice over our desires. We have choice whether to get attached to the desire or not. And we have choice whether to act or not. So if we act, these three things is the present life in our hands, which can change our future samskaras and our future vasanas. So only these
So
three.
if all vasanas are gone, then there won't be any rebirth.
With self-realization, vasanas gone and also self-realized, meaning that you understood your true self. Like you can be a desireless person all throughout without understanding your true nature. You cannot become one with the self. You have to realize that you are one with the universe.
What does that mean? Mean that you won't take rebirth again? You will be united with the universe?
Yeah, when we say you are one with the universe, you are transcending everything and you become one with that. When you realize that you are that, you become one with that, because there are no two things. That's what the Vedanta says. There are no two things as you and the universe. You are the universe. And when you realize that you are one with the universe, for example, the Sadhguru videos, right, they tell in a form of a bubble. How he explains is that, so we are all like a bubble. If I blow a soap bubble, there is one bubble which you can say it's my bubble, and there is another bubble which I can say that it's your bubble. So you are a bubble, I am a bubble. And the covering for that bubble, right, the layer of the bubble, there is air inside that bubble, and the outer covering is what we call as the karmic baggage, the memories and everything. So once you exhaust all your karmas, if you pop a bubble, what will happen? Can you find the air in the bubble? Can you tell me where exactly was the air?
Okay, so that is what we say mukti, that one only, right?
Yes.
You unite with God.
Yeah, that is becoming one with this cosmos, or one becoming, it is the same way. So if you have still karmic baggage, that bubble goes and finds another physical body. If the body leaves and the bubble comes out, and if there is no karmic weightage to that, it becomes one with the universe.
Okay. Okay, Abhita. Maybe that is the reason, right? We see that no people in the same family have the same thought process, same ideology, because it comes from their previous birth, I think, right? The vasanas, what we are talking.
Yeah.
Okay.
So here, if you see, this is from the Adi Sankaracharya. He says that even after the truth has been realized, there remains that strong, beginningless obstinate impression that one is the agent and experiencer, which is the cause of one's transmigration. So the transmigration happens that when you think that you are just your body or thing, until the time you fully realize that you are one with that true self, or you and that experiencer are the same, that thing continues. And here also they say that sages call that liberation, which is the extinction of vasanas here and now, with the constant identification with the supreme self. This both are needed for liberation. So it's a very abstract concept. Yes, but let me give you this analogy. When I came to vasanas in
Did
Sanskrit
not
means,
get this, Abhita. Sorry to interrupt. Did not
Yeah.
get this, Abhita.
no, Adi Shankaracharya says that vasano prakyaso mokshaha. So what is moksha is, if a person lives carefully, constant identification with the supreme self. So this is that 11th and 12th, that I is not my body, mind or intellect. I means my supreme self or the Atman. When you lead your complete life with that identity, and you also exhaust your vasanas, it is called liberation.
Thank you.
Okay, these two needs to be met.
So 2 is the self-realization and exhaustion of the vasanas, Abhita.
Yes.
Both.
Yes. There are a lot of self-realized people who still continue in this world because of the physical body, because the physical body will get exhausted when their karmic baggage is totally offloaded. So if you see all the supreme people like Buddha, Ramana Maharshi, Adi Shankaracharya, they were all self-realized people at a very young ages, but still they had physical body, so they had to act and exhaust all the, it's not exhaustion, but still they had to act because of their karmas. So I'm just telling you a practical application or a practical thing that we are doing every day, but we don't relate to the significance of it. We all do the Karpura Harati in our house, right? We lit the camphor in our house.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Camphor is a solid which turns volatile, gives a bright light, and then just comes out. And the significance of this is very, very practical. To the vasana is nothing but a fragrance. That's why we say that you are determined by your vasanas. So if you have a good fragrance, meaning good samskars, good vasanas, so you will be having good habits. If you have wrong impressions, then your vasanas will be wrong and you will be having wrong habits. Do you know Garbha Griha in old temples? Now everywhere there is light in the temples, but if we go to the olden days, authentic old temples, there will be the deity kept in the main place, which we call as Garbha Griham.
Yeah, even in Tirupati, it's very dark, right? When we go inside
Yeah.
till that, yeah.
So that Garbha Griha, if you see, right, there will be actually 3 kinds of enclosures to any of the Garbha Griha. You have to pass through the 3 enclosures, and once you reach the Garbha Griha, what will happen? It will be very dark. There will be a small lamp that they would have lit at the top or somewhere at any one part. There will be a lamp, and when we go near it, if there is a pujari, the pujari will come and lit the camphor. And once the camphor, he starts showing the camphor to the deity, you will be able to see the deity clearly. You will be able to see the deity clearly. And once the light is gone, then normally we will not be able to see the same thing. Like first, whatever was there, it will be there. So what is this connection with the vasanas that I am talking about is that the inside of the temple is dark. The priest lights a piece of camphor from small oil lamp and the camphor burns away. The light exposes the deity. Why? What is the significance of this is that the 3 enclosures represents the 3 material layers of a personality, which is our body, mind, and intellect. So when we cross over the 3 material layers of our personality, we come to that Garbhagriha, front of the Garbhagriha, which is dark. So the temple represents the structure of the human being, and the deity represents the Atman or the Supreme Self. So you will, after you pass through the 3 layers of the personality, you will come to the deity, which is nothing but the Atman or the Supreme Self, which is dark in the sense it's unknown, it's absolute. So you come to that point, and when a camphor is born, that means all our vasanas are burnt out, all our desires are burnt out. Then we will start to realize ourselves after crossing over the limitations of 3 material layers of our personality. And when we do this, we reach our inner core, which gives us the knowledge of the truth. And when we reach the inner core, which is our personality, this will help us to burn all our vasanas in the fire of knowledge, which is the knowledge of the absolute or the self. And in this process, we will gain the self-realization or the supreme self. And this is the reason we do that camphor thing every day, just as an indication that our ultimate aim in our life is to realize that supreme self. And so when the camphor goes, the deity is not seen, but you will be able to visualize the deity within you, which is the supreme self within you.
Abhita, what are the 3 layers you said? Can
The
you
body,
tell
mind,
again?
and intellect. So physically,
Okay,
the 3
these 3.
layers,
Okay.
yeah. So because only when you raise above your intellect, see, when you have to raise above, they say that there is nothing to do. You just sit in a room with a complete intensity of quest of who you are, and just don't attend to any of your thoughts. They say sitting down just for few days, you will be able to realize the truth. There is no need to read any scriptures. There is no need to do anything. But you should have that intensity that you should not sit for some time and say, I'm getting bored because of sitting. That inner quest should be there, and you just sit with no concepts, no kind of imaginations, just with the thought of who you are. And you should not attend to any of your thought. Whatever thought comes, you just don't attend to it. You just leave it free. Your mind will, after some time, stop attending to the thoughts. You just focus on your breath. And that's when they say that we will be able to realize the true self, or you will be able to really understand the true bliss that is there.